Well, and having a great Friday night. Tonight we're going to be talking about the multi-day severe weather event that is going to be occurring mainly through tomorrow on Saturday, and then into parts of some parts of Monday on November the 4th. And so we'll be talking about the severe weather chances, and then we'll also be talking about the tropics a little bit in the second half of the video, but in the first half we'll be talking about the severe weather threats for over the next couple of days. And so we won't talk a lot about the tropics, but I'm just mainly going to be focusing on the severe weather part of this video because it's kind of a now thing more than the tropics is kind of a future event and something we need to worry about later, if that makes sense. But for right now, we just kind of worry about the severe weather threats over the next couple of days. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So for the latest update, the 01Z update for tonight on Friday, we do just have a marginal risk into parts of southeastern New Mexico, and then into the panhandle of Texas, and then into parts of western Texas as well. And then again, this is just a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk at this time, and there is not a tornado risk with this marginal risk, but there is a wind risk, and that is a 5% wind risk in these areas here. And then there is also a hail risk into these areas here for tonight on Friday. So first, looking at our 500 millibar flow on the 18Z GFS, and just mainly looking at really what's driving this severe weather event, really starting kind of tonight and then going over the next couple of days into parts of Monday. And so first here, again, looking at our 500 millibar flow here, and this is in the mid levels of the atmosphere here. So first looking at tonight, and you just have kind of some slight troughing into the western parts of the United States, and then kind of with your main trough way up here into the kind of western and northwestern US, you have this just kind of small kinks in the flow here with kind of some shortwave troughs here, and then you have some higher wind speeds here in the mid levels, and that will contribute towards tonight's severe weather for parts of New Mexico and Texas. And then looking at our main system, our main trough that will be responsible for the severe weather across parts of the central U.S. We go into Saturday here, and then by basically midday Saturday, we have this trough digging down to the southeast and moving into parts of the western and central U.S. by tomorrow on Saturday. And then by Sunday midday, you have this large potent trough here, basically neutrally tilted really at this point, and that continues to move kind of to the southeast and to the east, and then you have that amplified flow over parts of the central U.S., and then again that amplifies even further on Monday, and then you have a positively tilted trough by this point, but you have increased flow across parts of these areas in the central U.S., and you just have this large potent trough, especially for this time of year. This is something you would mainly see kind of towards the springtime in these areas, and so this is going to be a problem for sure, really, over the next couple of days with the severe weather event. And we'll really just have to see how much moisture is able to get pushed to the north, and really the more moisture and the larger the moist sector, probably the more development we'll really have, because really the only area that the severe weather lacks, or the severe weather ingredients lack, is the moisture, and it doesn't lack a lot of that, but that's the only really thing here that is kind of holding us back from being an even more robust severe weather event. But again, that'll eventually kind of move out maybe sometime late Monday night into Tuesday, and we'll still have some amplified flow across these areas, and we could see maybe a secondary severe weather event on Tuesday, but it's just kind of far out to tell at this time, and that'll eventually exit by sometime early next week and maybe into the middle of next week. So first, looking at New Mexico and Texas, and then I didn't mention this earlier, but we're going to go day by day with these severe weather events. So setups, I mean. So for tomorrow's setup, we'll just go for that day, and then we'll move on to the next instead of just putting it all together. So you can, it's kind of easier to line up that way if I do it just day by day instead of doing it all at once, if that makes sense. But again, first here, looking at New Mexico and Texas. Over the next couple of hours, you might have some storms beginning to develop into parts of New Mexico and Texas, and then by late tonight and early tomorrow on Saturday, very early tomorrow on Saturday, you have some storms beginning to develop into New Mexico, and those will eventually move into Texas. And again, you will have that hail risk and that wind risk with these storms here, and so you'll just have to watch that as you get kind of into the morning hours tomorrow on Saturday, and those will continue on to the east. But your main storms will really begin to develop into parts of eastern New Mexico, and again, those will head to the east with more developing to the south, and then even some rain and showers and storms, showers and storms getting going into the panhandle of Oklahoma and even into Kansas tomorrow on Saturday. And that'll eventually kind of form into a line, and that's what we'll be discussing for tomorrow's severe weather event. But really, that's about it for the rest of tonight. So let's go ahead and talk about Saturday's severe weather event. So now looking at tomorrow's severe weather setup, which is Saturday, November the 2nd, we have a marginal risk all the way from parts of extreme southern Kansas into parts of Oklahoma, into the panhandle of Texas and southeastern New Mexico, with a slight risk also integrated into here into southeastern New Mexico, into parts of Texas, and then into parts of kind of southwestern Oklahoma here. And so there is a little bit of a tornado risk for tomorrow, and there is a 5% down here into parts of Texas, and then a larger 2% area all the way from parts of Oklahoma into Texas and New Mexico. And then looking at our wind risk, we do have a 15% risk here of high winds or damaging winds, into southwestern Oklahoma, into parts of Texas as well, and then a 5% risk that surrounds that 15% risk all the way from parts of extreme southern Kansas into Oklahoma, into Texas and New Mexico. And then for our hail risk, we do have a 15% risk down here into parts of southeastern New Mexico, and then into parts of Texas, with a hatched risk here in those dashed lines into parts of that 15% risk, and that is that hatched area is a 10% or greater probability of 2-inch diameter hail or larger within 25 miles of a point in this area here, with those black dashed lines and that black border around that. And that is again for tomorrow's risk on Saturday. So now looking at tomorrow's severe weather setup for Saturday, and again from those storms that will develop tonight, you'll have that kind of line that develops here, and then you'll have that wind risk with that, and all hazards will be possible into some of these areas here. And so that line will continue to move east throughout the kind of morning hours and then into the afternoon hours, and then you'll have some more storms that'll try to get going here into Texas, and they may be isolated down here into parts of the kind of southern panhandle of Texas. And then even more storms will get going there, and then you'll have this kind of long line of storms moving through parts of Kansas and Oklahoma, and that will be responsible for that wind risk as well. And again, all hazards are possible into parts of these areas here, and really these storms will last throughout much of the day, even into parts of Texas. You'll have storms in the morning, and they'll continue all the way out into parts of the evening and nighttime hours tomorrow, even into Sunday. And then you really could have another potential line that gets going into Texas and maybe even Oklahoma throughout kind of tomorrow night into really late tomorrow night into early potentially on Sunday. And so that'll be something we'll have to watch as well, even for this nasty line that shows up on the 18Z HRRR, and we'll have to watch that as we continue with these models. But again, You'll have storm coverage throughout most of the day in Texas tomorrow, and into parts of central and northern Texas, not the entire state, but into parts of central and kind of northern into the panhandle of Texas, and then into Oklahoma as well. You'll have storms really throughout much of the day tomorrow, and then eventually those will move out, and then that brings us to our Sunday severe weather event, or setup, excuse me. I keep saying event. I need to say setup, excuse me. And then looking at our kind of low-level jet here, you'll have a kind of a little bit of a low jet down here into parts of kind of western and parts of west central Texas, and then really that won't get going much until tomorrow evening. And so this will be the time period we'll have to watch for those isolated storms that get going there, and then as they kind of ride that boundary and move to the north, you'll have that low level jet amplify and even into parts of Oklahoma as well. Maybe out ahead in front of that line, you'll have that low level jet there in place. So we'll have to watch that for those storms. But looking at Cape here, you'll have plenty of Cape with these storms kind of to the south of that line, and that'll be in a environment plenty unstable for those storms to develop. So you'll definitely have no shortage of instability and dew points well into the 60s, and maybe even to the maybe hitting 70 in some areas where those storms will get going. So you'll have to really watch that as well. But there's no doubt that there will be storms tomorrow, and that low level jet will aid in that tornado threat into parts of these areas, as well as that hail and wind risk into these areas tomorrow on Saturday. Now looking at our day 3 severe thunderstorm outlook, and this is for Sunday, November the 3rd. And so we have quite a large slight risk here and a marginal risk in parts of the central U.S. And this slight risk extends all the way from parts of southern Nebraska down to the south into parts of Kansas, into parts of Oklahoma, as well as into parts of Texas. And then we have a marginal risk around that, and that extends all the way from parts of Nebraska down to the south into Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. And again, this is for Sunday, November the 3rd. And then we do have a 15% to risk here, and that is a automatic slight risk at this time, and a 5% around that, and that is again an automatic marginal risk and an automatic slight risk here into these areas. And then looking at Monday, November the 4th, it's severe weather set up as well here. So you do have an automatic, this 15% risk here, and that is a automatic slight risk at this range. And we'll get a more in-depth outlook tomorrow, because the level 1 through 5 outlooks are only really updated and released on day 3 and day 2 as well as day 1. But again, this is a automatic slight risk at this time, and that extends all the way from parts of extreme western Illinois into Missouri, southeastern Kansas, parts of Arkansas into Oklahoma, as well as parts of kind of eastern Texas as well. And again, this is for Monday, November the 4th. So for day 3 and day 4, which is for Monday and Tuesday, we'll just be looking at the GFS for this, just because the short range models are not going to be too reliable at this range. But looking at the GFS here, as you can see, we go to Monday, and we have this low pressure here, and this is our low pressure, or Sunday night, excuse me. And then as we get to Monday, you'll have those storms out in front of this low pressure getting developed into parts of the central U.S. And then that continues on Monday, and then we kind of have this other surge right here, and this will be our storms responsible for the Monday severe weather event. And then we continue that on to the east, and then we'll have our secondary kind of Tuesday severe weather set up here, and that'll likely be more of a linear storm mode with some of these storms on Tuesday. But again, that'll be kind of the setup as we get into the next couple of days. So again, not looking at any short range models at this time. First looking at moisture here. We'll go to Monday morning, and here is kind of midday Monday. You have dew points all the way into hitting 60 in parts of Iowa and even Illinois, but you have a pretty large moist sector here of dew points well into the 60s and even upper 60s in some areas, but mostly widespread lower to mid 60s dew points, into these areas, with some areas saying kind of the upper 60s to almost 70 degree dew points there into those areas. And then as we get into Tuesday as well, you don't have as much of a surge to the north with that moist sector, but you still do have dew points into the lower 60s, and then even into parts of Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and then to the south here into Mississippi and Louisiana. You have dew points all the way into the 60s and upper 60s in some areas into Louisiana, and that'll again be for our Tuesday severe weather event. And as that trough moves out, you'll have that moisture associated with that move to the east, and then we could potentially have another severe weather set up maybe late next week, but it's still kind of early to talk about that at this time, and we just gotta continue to focus on this event before we look at the next possible setup. Now finally switching to the tropics part of this video, and first we'll be looking at the 2-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center. And so from our previous videos, we were discussing and kind of looking over the potential for a system in the Caribbean, and the GEFS ensemble and kind of the GFS has been really pointing at and suggesting this happening for the past several days. And honestly, I would give credit to the GEFS and GFS for this, because they have been sticking this out and continuing to show this kind of solution here. So really that's what we're going to kind of continue to use in this video as well, and maybe the EPS and Euro, and then some other global models, just to kind of compare them and compare their guidance. But first, again, looking at our 2-day graphical tropical weather outlook. First, we'll look at our main area that'll be for this video, and that is that area into the Caribbean here, and that has a 40% chance of developing into a tropical system within the next 2 days. And then we have an area kind of into the kind of near the Greater and Lesser Antilles, and this has a 10% chance of developing into a tropical system within the next 2 days. And then we look all the way up here into the Northern Atlantic, and this is an area that has a chance of developing into a system, 50% chance of developing into a system, within the next 2 days as well. And we really won't be talking about this too much in this video, just because it does not have much of a chance to affect anybody at this time. But now looking at our 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook, again looking at this area here, it has a 80% chance of developing into a system within the next 7 days. And so for most of the week this week, this is just maintained. This was maintained at a 40% chance, and that has been bumped up really over the past couple days. So confidence has increased for this developing into a system. And then also this system here, this area of storms just has a 10% chance of developing into a system within the next 7 days. So that is still low at this time. And then still up here has a 50% chance of developing into a cyclone within the next 7 days, not 50, and so again, really not going to be talking about that too much, just because it will not affect, it likely will not affect many people. But again, this will be the main topic for the tropics part of the video, and we'll be talking about this on the models and just comparing them and the different solutions for that. So let's go ahead and look at some of the models. Now looking at the models here, first looking at the 18Z GFS for the Caribbean here. And so it does have a low pressure eventually getting developed maybe sometime on Sunday, and then even to Saturday night we could have a potential system develop there. And then by Sunday this will continue to kind of head north into the Caribbean, and then maybe affect I would say potentially Cuba, but again it's just kind of hard to pinpoint all the details at this time. But Cuba could be somewhere that could be potentially impacted there. And so by this point, let me back up here. By this point, sometime on Monday, it could be become a tropical storm, and then by kind of midday Monday, it could be almost a hurricane by that point, and then even affect Jamaica there. But again, the GFS does have this headed kind of towards and will hit Cuba, and then as maybe like a Category 1 hurricane by that point, and then affect the Cayman Islands as well, and then would have that heading over Cuba, and then eventually getting out into the Gulf of Mexico and strengthening just a little bit before kind of going to the southwest Gulf of Mexico, and then making a turn to the kind of north there, and then would have it kind of going up to the north and making a landfall in Louisiana. But again, I'll say this probably a lot throughout this part of the video: do not really pay attention to much stuff, especially the GFS over 200 hours or even 180 hours out, just because it's just not reliable. And as you can see, if we go to the previous run before this, it has a system here. Go to the previous run, has it all the way up here. Again, does not even have a system at all, so it's not going to be too reliable. But I do think we could potentially have a system that could impact Cuba and could potentially get into the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not going to rule that out really at this time. But going back here and then looking at the European here, we'll go to kind of Monday. Eventually does get a low pressure developed on Monday. Kind of has this has just storms and showers lingering over Cuba and Jamaica as well, and the Cayman Islands. And then it just has this low pressure, a weak low pressure just lingering around, and eventually goes in the Gulf of Mexico, and then kind of gets merged in with the flow and just flat out dissipates by that point sometime maybe early next week, but early middle of next week. But again, we're just gonna have to continue to watch this system, these storms and showers, and see if it could develop into a system. And looking at the EPS ensembles, and we'll look at the GEFS ensembles here as well. You do have that signal there, and it has gotten a little bit stronger compared to previous runs, but not a whole lot stronger. And again, does have that signal, kind of the average of that signal, going there and heading into the Gulf of Mexico after it goes through parts of the Caribbean as well, and then eventually just gets in there, and those members spread out a lot more. And then looking at the GEFS ensemble, the GEFS ensemble has quite a strong signal, as it had been shown from the previous days, and then it has that signal quite a bit farther to the east into parts of Cuba, and then kind of has those members spreading as well, some going kind of into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, some headed towards the central Gulf of Mexico and western, and some even curve all the way down to the south and then go back into the Caribbean. So again, it's just too far out to pinpoint smaller details like these, and we're just going to have to continue to go day by day and see how the models continue to handle this. But the signal is definitely there for a system, a potential system at this time. And so we'll lastly look at the icon here. I will go to, so here's Sunday the 3rd, and then into Monday has that low pressure developing there, and very similar to the European, has that kind of going up, or kind of has it the same strength as the European, and then has that around the same location as the GFS, and then this has this low pressure lingering around, and eventually gets that kind of into the eastern Gulf of Mexico after it goes across Cuba, and then eventually has that heading into the Gulf of Mexico, but nothing much there. And so I know I haven't mentioned this, but I'm not really going to talk about much of the atmosphere that will kind of contribute towards the development of this system. But the good thing is that the sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico have decreased a little bit. So once the storm gets into the Gulf of Mexico, it is not going to be able to kind of strengthen as much if it could, but mainly kind of maintain its strength or weaken possibly if a system does get into the Gulf of Mexico. The Caribbean, on the other hand, is a different story, and is still quite warm and will definitely support development of any system that gets into this area. So that's the bad thing there, but the good thing is that the sea surface temperatures in the Gulf have decreased a little bit, so you won't have really rapid intensification possible there. You'll just have maybe some intensification, or kind of maintaining its strength or even weakening once it would get into the Gulf. So that is a good thing for sure. But again, we're just going to have to continue to watch this potential system. I don't know why I keep saying system, but it is a potential system, and it's just storms right now. But again, we'll have to watch this and see how the models play it out. But that'll be it for the tropics part of the video. So that's going to be it for tonight's update. I do appreciate all of you watching, and I do apologize for not having any videos out really kind of this week. I'm going to try to get another one out this weekend just because it's getting a lot more busier with severe weather setups, and the tropics are getting a little busier. But I do think the tropics will calm down after we have this kind of last wave of systems. So we don't have much left of hurricane season, so that is a good thing for sure. But I really do think after kind of the next week or two, the tropics will calm down a little bit, and you won't have those as much activity as we've been having the past couple of days. But again, I do appreciate all of y'all watching, and I do hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's Friday night.